Hello everyone, we will now talk about work on the Metaliteracy Wikipedia article in a collaborative environment. In this presentation we will cover what is Wikipedia and its basic rules, what's Metaliteracy and its goals, and the process of writing the Metaliteracy Wikipedia article. Wikipedia is a free online encyclopedia which content is made and regulated by a network of users. All work on Wikipedia must adhere to the 5 pillars. In addition to them, there is a set of user-generated and user-regulated rules, and because almost all of Wikipedia is based on the work of voluntary users, there is a risk of bias. The 5 pillars of Wikipedia are the basis of all work done on the platform. They are fundamental rules and they are self-explanatory. Those pillars are as following. Number 1. Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. Number 2. Wikipedia is written from a neutral point of view. Number 3. Wikipedia is free content that anyone can use, edit, and distribute. Number 4. Wikipedia's editors, the users of Wikipedia, should treat each other with respect and civility. And number 5. Wikipedia has no firm rules. The final pillar opens the possibility for the 4 early ones to be further explained by guidelines. It also means that the rules are, as the content, prone to change by its users. Even though there are no firm rules, the pillars aren't enough to provide rules and guidelines for the work on the content of Wikipedia. The 5th pillar puts the rules as both a kind of regulation and a kind of content. So the rules are prone to change depending on the changes of circumstances and also a way to provide a higher quality in the process of collaboration and the quality of content. The rules can be divided into 7 groups depending on what they are about. We have behavioral rules that are further explaining the 4th pillar on civility and also to provide a guide for a more productive way of communication. We have editing rules which usually provide advice about categorization and navigation. We have the content guide and naming conventions. The first one applies only to an article namespace and offers advice on identifying and inclusion of information, and the second gives correct ways to name articles on certain topics. The deletion guide explains the criteria and procedures for deleting unwanted pages. An example for that criteria is an article with no sources of information. The style guidelines contains extensive advice on writing and it corresponds to the first 2 pillars, as encyclopedia entries are written in a style differently from news or academic articles, and the neutral point of view is acquired both by style and sources. Finally, we have notability guidelines which outline the criteria that the subject must meet to merit Wikipedia articles, as it's not possible for any encyclopedia to provide entries about everything known in the known world.
One of Wikipedia's pillars of a neutral point of view is in direct conflict with the bias that can be found within. Wikipedia's classification problem is directly tied to its aspirations toward universality. Universal access fails to recognize the social and political barriers to realizing such an ideal. Editing power and decision-making rests with a small group of people. Who has been there the longest, who has the most say, who has the loudest voice, and that voice is predominantly white and male. In particular, Wikipedia suffers from an age-old sexist tendency, that of defining a woman by her relationship status with a man. Wikipedia's openness and anonymity leave it vulnerable to manipulation by neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and racist academics seeking a wider audience for extreme views. Respective points of view can be attributed to specific sets of editors, resulting in false and misleading content. As an example, in 2018, historians at the University of Zagreb stated that the Croatian Wikipedia had factual mistakes and ideologically loaded language, and they referred their students to English Wikipedia instead. The past president of Wikimedia DC, James Hare, asserted that a lot of Black history is just left out of Wikipedia due to articles predominantly being written by white editors.
We come to one of the most important questions of the presentation. What is metaliteracy? As we can see in this slide, we define metaliteracy as a pedagogical model for thinking and knowing in the open age of social technology that is both connected and divided. To have a context on what the word metaliteracy means, the meta prefix in metaliteracy was initially defined to encourage learners to think about their own thinking while taking charge of their learning through self-regulation. Based on our understanding, metaliteracy is built upon the existing information literacy. It is also an overarching and self-referential framework. It integrates emerging technology and unifies multiple literacy types. It also gives an emphasis on producing and sharing information in participatory digital environments. On to the next part of the slide, we talk about metaliteracy and its goals. Metaliteracy has 4 major goals. Goal number 1, actively evaluate content while also evaluating one's own bias. It talks about evaluating the content and bias. Goal number 2, engage with all intellectual property ethically and responsibly. This goal is about the false info and about being the responsibility of individuals to ethically produce content. Goal number 3, produce and share information in a collaborative and participatory environment, refers to sharing information in collaboration. And goal number 4, developing learning strategies to meet lifelong personal and professional goals. This goal emphasizes learning as a lifelong process and learning from errors or mistakes. In the next slide, we talk about a metaliterate learner. There are 4 major domains of a metaliterate learner, them being metacognitive, cognitive, behavioral, and affective. There are several different characteristics of a metaliterate learner, such as being informed, collaborative, participatory, reflective, civic-minded, adaptable, open, and productive. There are 7 different roles that a metaliterate learner can take on, such as a researcher, participant, communicator, translator, author, teacher, collaborator, producer, and a publisher. To delve a little more in the meaning of each of these characteristics, we have a look into this particular flowchart. Being informed refers to explore info creation process, assess content and bias, and seeking guidance from experts. Being collaborative, attribute to entering ongoing conversations, seek out research conversations. Being participatory, contribute to information marketplace, understanding responsibility of participation, and contribute to scholarship. Being reflective, indicate maintaining attitude via self-evaluation, be aware of own bias, examine own information privilege. Being civic-minded refers to respecting ideas of others, recognize disempowering systems, and value a diverse worldview. Being adaptable, point out to accepting ambiguity, exhibit mental flexibility, and persist in face of such challenges. Being open, seeks out multiple perspectives and maintains an open mind. And last but not least, productive. It understands information dissemination methods, recognizing roles as scholarship contributor, and value knowledge production process.
Now we want to look further into why the Wikipedia entry on metaliteracy hasn't been published yet. And there were 2 comments. The first comment was made in 2018, and it was basically saying that the new word or concept of metaliteracy is based on a single book and that it has not yet risen to the level of inclusion into encyclopedia. And it also said that it has to be covered in multiple and independent, reliable sources. So that was the first time that the draft was published to Wikipedia, and it was rejected. Then it was published again in 2020, but it was also rejected. This time, the second comment was saying that it was only used by a handful of people and that the additional sources do not support its notability. So it was basically a bit better than the first one, but there were probably still a few issues with the article. So our objective to get the article published was to resolve these comments. Therefore, we first had a look at the Wikipedia draft and analyzed it and tried to find what was the problem or what the people writing these comments have a problem with. So we first found that there were too many and long citations, which is probably what the first comment said, that it was kind of like a dictionary entry. Then we analyzed the references used. There were 16 in total, and 6 by them were by Jacobson and Mackey. that was something we wanted to keep in there because the concept was based on the idea. But we wanted to add more because there were only 5 about information literacy and 4 about practical application. So what we want to try is to add more references by other authors who use the concept of metaliteracy. And also what we found to be missing was that we needed a more clear differentiation of metaliteracy and information literacy. And like I just said, we wanted to add in more of the practical application of metaliteracy in different literature.
We'll now try to resolve the comments made earlier. Application of metaliteracy. So we can see that metaliteracy has been is being taught and is being accepted as a concept worldwide. So there's teaching about the use of social media as an information source. There's enriching, blending learning environments in China. We've also seen German universities and Bosnian higher education systems also trying to incorporate metaliteracy in their education. Later in 2021, it also talks about how they were used to develop better strategies to teach media and information literacy in education in Bosnia and other countries also. Now we can have a look at the application of metaliteracy, digital divide. So it is an empirical study concerning the connection of older adults to iPad technology. So the study that was made, which had an observation in terms of how did they behave before using an iPad and after using an iPad. And the outcome was such that the participants were able to improve their metaliteracy skills, including their knowledge and self-reflection.
As we already mentioned, metaliterate learner is, among other things, a collaborator involved in a collaborative process. This is why we would like to mention the collaborative perspective, where this learning process was conducted in collaboration by 6 learners coming from 4 different countries across 3 different continents. Equally important is the gender perspective and gender balance, with participation of 3 female and 3 male students coming from different generations speaking 8 different languages, which helped us to jointly discover knowledge on metaliteracy created in all of these languages. In conclusion, this is the process we applied to get our collaborative version of Wikipedia article on metaliteracy in English language. Firstly, after thorough research, we started the process of rewriting the draft of the metaliteracy article, where we added practical application, conducted rewriting of the definition, and have added objectives with intention to make a better case why this term deserves an entry in the Wikipedia. After this process of writing, we have sent this draft to the original creator of Wikipedia entry, Ms. Gina Bennett, seeking her comments and thus involving her as well in this collaborative process. Finally, we resubmitted this new draft to the Wikipedia, and we are waiting for the administrators to give us the feedback. This process may take longer time, considering there are more than 3,000 articles currently under review. Some of our extensive research can be seen in references that represent just a small number of sources we consulted. We hope this learning process will be as beneficial for you as it was for us. Thank you for your attention.